Now, what is the choice for the Japanese government? Given the 3 years, the Japanese government is now reviewing the new energy policy, which is due in August next year. In fact, the current plan, which is in the middle, was drawn only in June last year to meet the goal of 25% reduction of CO2 by 2020, announced by Prime Minister Hatoyama at that time. The new plan included a sharp increase of renewables and nuclear to 71% of the portfolio from 34% in 2007. But given the public sentiment after Fukushima, it's not easy to increase nuclear power generation. It is also very technically challenging to increase renewables more rapidly than 2010 plan. The options available to Japanese government are limited, and finding a right energy mix is not the most enviable task. Now, the third agenda, which is about the mitigation or prevention of illness in the case of human body. This is the famous McKinsey chart, if you're familiar. This is the cost of abatement of CO2 in euro per ton, and horizontally, the volume to be abated in billion tons of CO2. Currently, the world produces something like 35 billion tons of CO2 out of hydrocarbon. The negative cost means on the left-hand side, you have economic gain by doing so, such as building efficiency, lighting, hybrid, what we call low-hanging fruits. These are the things we must do regardless, and could possibly take out something like 10 billion tons of CO2. Then in the middle, somewhere neutral options, such as preserving forestry. Toward the right-hand side of options, it will cost more, but needs to be done if we were serious about reducing CO2 longer term. These options include wind and solar power, or carbon capture and storage for coal power generation. There is no single solution or no silver bullet to this global challenge. And we have to do all of these things in all of the countries. And it is estimated that it will cost $1 trillion a year, which is roughly 1 or 2% of global GDP. But certainly, it's going to be cheaper than treating the problems in the future. Now, in this spectrum, let's explain what we do at Clinton Foundation. We work on climate change since 2007, on top of public health issues and others. And we operate in 40 cities around the world. We also have some people working on clean energy and forestry around the world, mostly in London, New York, Boston, and Australia, Sydney, and Melbourne. What is our strategic area of focus? We work on 3 areas. Firstly, on the city program we talked about, low-hanging fruits. They produce 70% of CO2, so we focus on those 40 cities. Now we are now aligned, or we have alliance with the Bloomberg Foundation. On the forestry, we have about 4 or 5 people working. Forestry accounts for 18% of CO2. And quite recently, you heard about Thailand flooding. And I learned in Thailand, for example, in 1961, 53% of the land was forestry. But in 1985, it's now 28%. So I'm not an expert, but you can see the water is not really holding anymore in the upstream. It's coming down all the way. And problem is it's happening not only in Thailand, but in many other countries. Clean energy, we work on CCS, as I mentioned, and CSP, which is concentrated solar power. These are long-term, difficult projects, which is not currently economic. So one more slide on what we do. How do we work? We work with the government, business, and NPOs. And we work as a consultant or facilitator. We don't invest in the project, but we work as an independent pro bono consultant. We don't do advocacy. We work on projects. My favorite way of saying it is we are interested in doing something about it rather than talking about it. Lastly, let's talk about what we can do about it. Here's another triangle. It's about creating shared value between individuals, businesses, and the government. Many of you are future leaders in Asia, either in the government or in the business or as an individual. If you're working with the government, you can do a number of things. You can create a policy framework for mitigating climate change issues that might include CO2 pricing. You can work with the rest of the world to achieve the global agreement instead of continuing to agree to disagree. You can also provide financial support so needed to start up low-carbon businesses. If you're in business, you can lead your organization to make climate change as an integral part of your corporate policy, rather than calling it as a nice-to-have public relationship issue. We know that no business in the 21st century will be sustainable without sharing common value with the society. We heard about that from the Renewable presentation. And as an individual who lives on the same planet, you can also do a lot of things. You can certainly communicate need for actions with your family and friends. You can also at least conserve energy and change your lifestyle to meet a new way of life. In all of these, what we need is your leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, today I talked about the climate change, the subject of which many people just don't want to hear about or don't want to talk about. However, global warming is happening, real, and getting worse. Current economic path will not achieve the goal set by the 2009 Copenhagen Accord at COP15. However, there are many ways to mitigate the world problem, and there is no single answer. You, as a future Asian leader, have a chance to lead the world as part of the government or business or individuals by sharing the common value with the society. This slide actually is a statement made at the Cambridge Sustainability Seminar last June. Capitalism only rewarded economic efficiency in the past 20th century. But in the new century, 21st century, which already passed 10 years, we will need redundancy in our system to develop resilience and sustainability. 21st century is different. Somebody mentioned about Steve Jobs, but Steve Jobs at Apple said at one of the speeches, "Stay hungry, stay foolish." And I would say to you, stay relevant, stay engaged. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wakiwaka. We just have a few questions from the audience.
Okay.
CCI works in a lot of countries. Why not China?
We do work in China. Beijing is one of the C40 cities. And We are now currently working on 2 areas, CSP and CCS. We're talking to the government and some of the key people trying to actually develop the program. So I think, as you know, China is one of the most progressive countries in terms of doing something about it. And we are looking forward to China making cost reduction on some of the technologies so that we can actually deliver. And so answer to that question, we are working on China as well.
In your opinion, what is the right step to reducing the cost of renewable energy?
Well, I think just like any other business, we should be using market force to make it happen. And we have seen the chart already seeing a huge decline in cost. And this can actually multiply as more people participate in the game. And market force is the answer to that.
What are some of the most successful private-public partnerships?
Well, I don't know to that answer. No.
Okay. Just one last question.
Yeah.
How can we convince rapidly growing emerging markets to curb their growth by replacing cheaper hydrocarbons with renewables or paying for carbon storage trading, given developed countries' growth since the Industrial Revolution has been underpinned by cheap fuel sources?
Yeah, I think it's the real key issue, and it's a good question because that is the really core of the issue at COP17. And as I mentioned, there is no one answer to that question. But what is important is that 93% of CO2 will come from non-OECD countries. So the countries actually emitting CO2 need to be responsible, and you have to find the best mix depending on your country's need. And I don't have a specific answer to that particular question, but that's what you need to do. Instead of saying it's OECD countries' problem, that day is gone.
Thank you, Mr. Wakiwaka.
Thank you.